It was the early 1980s, and the streets of Clerkenwell, London, were under the shadow of a gang that seemed untouchable. Who could have imagined that three brothers, seemingly ordinary at first glance, would rise to control some of the most lucrative and violent criminal operations in the city? The Adams brothers, Terry, Tommy, and Patrick, were not just criminals. They were a symbol of power, influence, and fear. By 1982, whispers of their reach stretched from backstreet pubs to high-rise offices, and their involvement in armed robberies, extortion, and racketeering made them figures both respected and dreaded. It was said that they could walk into a courtroom and emerge almost unscathed, leaving authorities frustrated and rivals trembling. Their wealth was staggering, their violence calculated, and their connections inside the police and legal system were enough to make anyone question who was really in control. How could three men bend a whole part of London to their will, and what would it cost those who dared to challenge them? The story of the Adams brothers begins far from the glare of headlines, in the narrow streets of Islington, London, during the 1950s and 60s. Born into a large Irish Catholic family, Terry, Tommy, and Patsy grew up in a household where resources were tight and discipline was strict. Their parents worked tirelessly, but the demands of raising so many children in a working-class neighborhood meant that survival often required more than honest effort. From an early age, the brothers learned to navigate the harsh realities of their environment, where respect was earned not just through hard work, but through toughness and cunning. Even as children, the Adams brothers showed distinct personalities that would later define their criminal empire. Terry, the eldest, displayed a sharp mind and a knack for planning, quickly taking on the role of strategist. Tommy, quieter but meticulous, managed money and logistics, learning how to turn small ventures into profitable schemes. Patsy, known for his strength and fearlessness, became the muscle, the one who ensured that their operations ran smoothly and that threats were dealt with swiftly. Together they formed a trio that balanced brains, finance, and force, a formula that would make them formidable in London's underworld. Their first encounters with crime were hardly shocking by the standards of Islington's tough streets. Early petty theft, market rackets, and small-time extortion taught them the rules of street-level survival and power. Local shopkeepers quickly learned that crossing the Adams boys was a mistake, and schoolyard fights sharpened their reputation for toughness. Yet beneath the surface, there was more than raw aggression. There was method, observation, and a growing sense of ambition. The cultural backdrop of Islington played a key role in shaping them. The post-war working-class neighborhoods were tight-knit but competitive, with communities wary of outsiders and protective of their own. Respect and loyalty were currencies as valuable as money, and the brothers absorbed this lesson early. Family bonds were strong, but the outside world demanded adaptability and ruthlessness. In this environment, the Adams brothers did not simply survive, they thrived, turning their early exposure to crime into the foundation of an empire that would one day cast a long shadow over London's streets. By the time they reached their late teens, it was clear that each brother had found his place. Terry with the plans, Tommy with the money, Patsy with the force. Together they were no longer just boys from a working-class Irish family, they were the architects of a criminal dynasty that would change London forever. By the early 1980s, the Adams brothers were no longer just local troublemakers. They were emerging as the masterminds of one of London's most feared criminal organizations. Clerkenwell, a tightly packed district in central London, became their base of operations, a neighborhood where loyalty was as valuable as currency and reputation could open doors or close them permanently. The brothers understood that to survive and thrive, they needed more than individual cunning. They needed a structured organization, one that could manage risk, enforce rules, and expand into multiple criminal ventures. The formation of the syndicate began with the recruitment of family members and trusted childhood friends. Terry, Tommy, and Patsy recognized the value of loyalty, selecting associates who would follow orders without question. Each recruit had a role, reflecting the brothers' own division of labor. Planners, financiers, enforcers, and foot soldiers. This hierarchy became the backbone of the operation, allowing them to manage everything from street-level rackets to large-scale criminal enterprises. Diversification was key. The Adams Syndicate didn't limit itself to petty theft or local extortion. Robbery networks were established, hitting both small shops and high-value targets, while extortion schemes ensured a steady flow of income from businesses unwilling to resist. Drug trafficking soon became a central focus, with the brothers carefully controlling distribution routes and suppliers to maximize profit while minimizing exposure. By the late 1980s, money laundering had entered their operations, with legitimate businesses used to clean the proceeds of illegal activities. It was during this period that the syndicate earned the nickname the A-Team, a reflection of both the Adams brothers' dominance and the respect, or fear, they commanded in London's criminal underworld. But the A-Team wasn't without rivals. Competition from other gangs, along with the ever-watchful eyes of law enforcement, demanded constant vigilance. Alliances were formed strategically, rivalries navigated carefully, and betrayal was met with swift, often violent consequences. By combining meticulous planning, family loyalty, and a willingness to use violence when necessary, the Adams brothers transformed the Clerkenwell syndicate into a criminal empire. It was no longer a street gang. It was a disciplined organization capable of influence and intimidation across London. Every robbery, every extortion, every trafficking route reflected their strategic vision. The foundation they built in Clerkenwell would carry them to heights few in London's underworld had ever reached, setting the stage for both notoriety and inevitable confrontation with the law. By the mid-1980s, the Adams brothers had firmly established themselves as more than local gangsters. Their operations had grown into a sprawling criminal network that reached across London and beyond. Drug trafficking became the backbone of their empire, with cocaine and heroin flowing through their distribution channels at an alarming rate. The profits were staggering, and the brothers knew exactly how to turn that wealth into power. Money was laundered through legitimate businesses, allowing them to live extravagantly while masking the true scale of their earnings. Violence was both a tool and a warning. The Adams Syndicate did not hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened their operations or betrayed them. Informants, rivals, or even former allies faced brutal consequences. One notable incident involved Frankie Fraser, a notorious figure in London's underworld. The Adams brothers, asserting dominance, orchestrated a targeted attack that sent a clear message. No one was untouchable. It was a demonstration of their reach and willingness to enforce loyalty with unflinching force. Their criminal interests extended far beyond drugs. Hijacking became a profitable enterprise, targeting shipments and vehicles carrying high-value goods. Gold bullion thefts added another layer of sophistication, requiring planning, precision, and connections that spanned legitimate and illicit networks. Arms dealing and human trafficking were also part of their portfolio, further expanding their influence while generating enormous profits. Each venture reinforced the gang's reputation, making them feared across London's criminal landscape. Corruption played a critical role in their ability to evade justice. Bribes and strategic manipulation of legal loopholes allowed the Adams brothers to avoid long-term imprisonment despite mounting evidence. Police investigations were met with obfuscation and intimidation, leaving law enforcement struggling to keep up. The gang's notoriety grew alongside their wealth, creating a paradox. They were highly visible and feared, yet remarkably untouchable. Despite their ruthless methods, the Adams brothers were not reckless. Each crime was calculated, each move designed to maintain control and minimize exposure. Their ability to intimidate rivals was matched only by their cunning in financial dealings. Violence, bribery, and strategic alliances worked together to form a network that was resilient, adaptive, and extraordinarily dangerous. By the late 1980s, the Clerkenwell Syndicate had evolved into a formidable criminal empire, one whose audacity and scale would shock even seasoned observers of London's underworld. The story of their criminal activities is not just one of violence and profit. It is a study in power, manipulation, and the ability to bend both people and systems to their will. The Addams brothers had transformed the landscape of organized crime in London, leaving a legacy of fear, wealth, and influence that would resonate for decades. Their empire was more than a collection of crimes. It was a statement. The Addams brothers were in charge, and anyone who underestimated them did so at their peril. At the heart of one of Britain's most notorious crime networks were three brothers, each carving a distinct path through the shadows of organized crime. Terry Addams, often described as the brains behind the operation, was a man of surprising contrasts. Outwardly polite and refined, he exuded the air of a genteel gentleman, the kind you might not suspect of orchestrating criminal empires. Yet beneath that composed exterior was a strategic mind capable of planning operations with meticulous precision. Terry's influence stretched beyond the street-level dealings. He was the architect, the one who saw the bigger picture, directing movements and ensuring the syndicate stayed a step ahead of law enforcement. His brother, Tommy Addams, occupied a different but equally crucial role. The financier of the family, Tommy's talent lay in money. He forged international connections, moving funds across borders, laundering profits, and maintaining the financial lifeblood of the organization. Where Terry planned the actions, Tommy ensured the rewards were secured and invested, often operating quietly behind the scenes. His network extended from London's underworld to the continent, touching on ventures that brought both wealth and danger. Then there was Patsy Addams, a figure whose reputation inspired both fear and caution. Known for his violent tendencies, Patsy acted as the syndicate's enforcer. His methods were brutal and direct, sometimes employing motorcycle-riding hitmen to assert dominance and settle disputes. Patsy's presence was a reminder that beneath the carefully constructed layers of strategy and finance, the syndicate wielded raw, unflinching power. He brought the physical edge that complemented Terry's cunning and Tommy's financial acumen. Supporting the brothers were trusted associates who played vital roles in their operations. Gilbert Winter, for instance, operated as a critical enforcer and key lieutenant, navigating the dangerous overlap of muscle and strategy. Solly Nahom, meanwhile, maintained connections that allowed the syndicate to interact with other criminal enterprises, keeping the network alive and adaptable. Each figure, while secondary to the Addams brothers, carried weight in the delicate balance of authority, loyalty, and fear that defined the group. Together, Terry, Tommy, and Patsy Addams presented a unique triad: the strategist, the financier, and the enforcer. Their combined skills created a formidable criminal empire, one that thrived on the synergy between intellect, wealth, and intimidation. Understanding their personalities and roles is essential to grasping how the syndicate operated, an organization where every decision, every move, and every act of violence was calculated, deliberate, and ruthlessly executed. For years, the Addams syndicate operated in the shadows, confident in their ability to outsmart the law. But behind the scenes, a silent and relentless force was closing in. MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence service, undertook one of its most intricate operations, determined to gather evidence that could finally dismantle the gang. Over 18 months, agents meticulously bugged safe houses, vehicles, and even the most unlikely places. Sofas, light fittings, and phones became conduits for secret surveillance. Every whisper, every plan, every argument was recorded, analyzed, and cross-checked. The operation was not just about listening. Financial investigators traced a web of money flowing through shell companies, international accounts, and cash couriers. Each transfer, each payment, revealed layers of the syndicate's empire, exposing the scale of their reach and the sophistication of their methods. The authorities were chasing shadows, but with patience and persistence, they turned those shadows into evidence. The gang, aware that the walls might have ears, tried repeatedly to adapt. Coded language, encrypted phones, and clandestine meetings became routine. Yet even the cleverest measures could not escape the painstaking work of the investigators. MI5's presence was invisible, but omnipresent. Every intercepted conversation chipped away at the sense of invincibility the brothers once held. By the end of the operation, law enforcement had amassed an unparalleled trove of intelligence. Hidden bugs had captured candid discussions about violence, threats, and financial manipulation. Surveillance footage and financial audits painted a picture of a criminal enterprise more intricate and dangerous than anyone had imagined. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with the gang believing they were one step ahead, while the authorities quietly mapped every move. The scale, precision, and patience of the operation underscored a simple truth. No matter how sophisticated the criminals, the law could adapt, observe, and strike. What began as whispers in hidden microphones culminated in evidence that would shake the syndicate to its core, proving that even the most elusive figures could not escape the reach of justice. The law eventually caught up with the Addams brothers, and the courtroom became the stage where their empire faced its reckoning. Terry Addams, long seen as the strategic mind behind the syndicate, was convicted of money laundering. His elaborate schemes, designed to disguise illegal profits as legitimate business earnings, could not withstand the meticulous investigations. Despite his genteel demeanor, the courts revealed a ruthless intelligence at work, moving vast sums across borders and accounts, all intended to remain beyond the reach of authorities. Tommy Addams faced his own downfall. Convicted for smuggling hashish into the UK, his network stretched internationally, leveraging contacts and shipping routes that made the operation both audacious and highly profitable. Yet even the most intricate plans failed under scrutiny. The trials laid bare the scale of their criminal enterprise, exposing patterns of violence, bribery, and financial manipulation that had once seemed untouchable. Alongside convictions came the seizure of assets. Financial confiscation orders under the Proceeds of Crime Act stripped the brothers of properties, vehicles, and bank accounts, turning ill-gotten gains into tangible proof of wrongdoing. Each confiscation served as a reminder that crime, no matter how carefully concealed, carries consequences. Still, the brothers repeatedly attempted to challenge these rulings, exploiting legal loopholes and delaying proceedings wherever possible. Courtrooms witnessed tense confrontations, public outbursts, and legal maneuvering that kept the spotlight on the syndicate long after the initial convictions. Despite these efforts, the convictions and asset confiscations sent a clear message. The law could dismantle even the most organized and well-protected criminal networks. While questions about hidden assets and undiscovered operations lingered, the combination of investigative persistence, detailed financial scrutiny, and legal pressure gradually eroded the Addams empire. The trials illustrated a fundamental truth. No amount of cunning or influence can ultimately shield criminals from accountability, and the pursuit of justice, though arduous, remains relentless. Even after the convictions and asset seizures, the shadow of the Clerkenwell crime syndicate continued to loom over London's criminal landscape. The Addams brothers had built more than a gang. They had created a system, a network so well organized that rival groups and emerging criminals could only watch and learn. Terry's strategic mind, Tommy's international connections, and Patsy's brutal enforcement left a mark that went beyond their immediate circle. Their operations set new standards for coordination, intimidation, and the flow of illicit funds, influencing how organized crime in the city functioned for years to come. Rival gangs felt the pressure. Some attempted to challenge the syndicate's dominance, only to face swift retaliation or find themselves outmaneuvered. The lingering fear in the underworld was real. Stories of Patsy's notorious enforcers on motorcycles and Terry's uncanny ability to predict threats became part of criminal folklore. Even after law enforcement disrupted their operations, whispers of the brothers' reach persisted, as if their influence could not be fully erased. The syndicate's international connections further amplified its impact. Smuggling networks, financial channels, and alliances with overseas cartels ensured that the Addams brothers' legacy extended beyond London. They had built bridges to organized crime in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, creating a system of influence that survived even in their absence. Intelligence agencies and police forces maintained surveillance on the surviving brothers, knowing that the knowledge, networks, and contacts they possessed could still fuel criminal activity. Their every move was watched, yet the legend they had built made them both feared and respected. Culturally, the Clerkenwell crime syndicate became a symbol of modern organized crime in the UK. Books, documentaries, and news features dissected their operations, examining how a group from a modest background could rise to dominate London's underworld. They became the benchmark for criminal ingenuity and ruthlessness, the standard against which other gangs were measured. For law enforcement, they were a cautionary tale, highlighting the lengths criminals would go to maintain power and the persistence required to bring them to justice. Even now, years later, the syndicate's legacy shapes the criminal environment in London. Their methods, financial sophistication, strategic planning, and the careful balance of intimidation and diplomacy have been adopted by newer gangs. Their story remains a study in power, ambition, and the risks inherent in the pursuit of dominance. The surviving brothers may be constrained by law, but the imprint of their empire endures. The Clerkenwell crime syndicate is remembered not just as a crime family, but as a force that changed the rules of London's underworld forever. The legacy of the Clerkenwell crime syndicate is more than just headlines or court cases. It is a story of power, ambition, and fear that continues to echo through London's underworld even today. The rise of Terry, Tommy, and Patsy Adams reshaped the rules of organized crime, showing how a single family could dominate entire networks, manipulate finances across borders, and command loyalty through both respect and intimidation. Their influence did not end with convictions or prison sentences. Rival gangs still remember their reach, law enforcement continues to monitor surviving members, and international cartels quietly acknowledge the mark left by their operations. What makes their story truly compelling is not just the crimes they committed, but the system they built and the shadow they cast over London's criminal landscape. It's a chilling reminder that even when justice prevails, the impact of ambition, cunning, and ruthlessness does not vanish overnight. Hidden alliances, international connections, and financial machinations create webs that take years to unravel, and in many ways, these webs still exist today. For viewers fascinated by the hidden layers of crime, the intelligence operations, and the high-stakes games played behind closed doors, the story of the Clerkenwell Syndicate is only the beginning. There are countless other tales of power, betrayal, and investigation waiting to be uncovered, each exposing the delicate balance between crime and justice in Britain. If you want to keep exploring the secrets, strategies, and scandals of the UK's most notorious criminal empires, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay with us as we continue to reveal the truth behind organized crime, one story at a time. The underworld may be hidden, but the truth is always waiting to be discovered.